we're going to move on into our next topic now, Brandon, and kind of stay on with those Huskies. And the question that I will pose to you is, at the end of the year, I said that the big saving grace for a Washington Husky team is that they have to win the Pac-12. But can we see a world? We're going to look into our crystal ball, kind of do a little magic and come up with the future. Could we see a future that holds an undefeated, and let's be honest, if they go undefeated, they'll be Pac-12 champions. Could we see an undefeated Washington Husky team miss out on the college football playoff when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we definitely can. And I think it's because, again, there's San Diego State University, going undefeated. But did they play anybody? Did they really play anyone that makes them good enough for someone to look and go, wow, yeah, they really deserve to be in the playoff. They're undefeated. No, that's just not how it works. If that's how it works, there'd be plenty of random teams in the playoffs, and it wouldn't be able to be just 4 teams. But I think that's the biggest part for me. It's that you really do have to look at these at the teams and the quality of the opponent that they're playing and how well that game went. I mean, I think sometimes you even have to look into that game. Well, how did this undefeated team play against this good team? How did this undefeated team play against this weak team? Did they look at some? Did this weaker team help to expose some weaknesses on that undefeated team? That's how I'm trying to look at it in the terms of what team should be in the top 4 in the rankings. And I can't bring myself to put Washington there because I don't see them as being a really, really strong undefeated team. I do not. I see Ohio State being a much better pick than the Washington Huskies right now at this point. I certainly do.
Well, and with me, are the Huskies a good team? Yes. Do they have a good quarterback? Well, I'm going to say great quarterback. Yes. Are they fun to watch? Yes. But I am going to draw parallels between this team that we see right now and the last Oregon, or the last Pac-12 team, which was Oregon, to go to the college football playoff. That Oregon team, 2014, the Chip Kelly Oregon system, even though that was Helfrich's first year's head coach, it was basically the Oregon system that Chip Kelly used. That team put up points ferociously. 62, 46, 48. 38 and 31 were like low scoring games, and 42, 45, 59, 45, 51, 44, 47, 51, 59, and then 20 in the one game that they lost in the college football playoff to Zeke and the Buckeyes. This Washington team is kind of similar. We're seeing the 48, 59, the 40s, 70 against Oregon, a few 30s here and there. So you're sitting there going, okay, this team kind of reminds me of that Oregon team. A lot of points being scored. They're undefeated to this point. That Oregon team had lost a game. But the thing that I look at, and the thing that I think Washington fans and Washington itself should blame, is do not blame yourself. Blame your conference for why you are getting disrespected. Don't blame the committee. Don't blame guys like me and Brandon who are, and I'm using air quotes, putting you down. Blame your conference. Because over the past few years, we have seen the decline of the Pac-12. Oregon this year, crap. Stanford, crap. USC, yeah, they're on the uptick right now, but they're nothing for what they compare to be. Arizona's not what they used to be. Cal is even a lesser opponent right now. Your overall conference is crap compared to everything else. Compared to the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, I'll even say. Well, the thing that you do beat the Big 12 on is you have a conference title game, so at least I can give you kind of props there. But I'd kind of put the Pac-12 and the Big 12 on equal standing almost. And because of your opponents in your conference, That's why you're not doing anything. This year, the 7th ranked Stanford Cardinals they beat, but where's Stanford ranked now? Nowhere near there. Nowhere near the rankings. 17 Utah. Okay, that's still a viable win because Utah's still in the rankings. And then you're going to play 25 Washington State. As of right now, you will have 3 ranked opponents that you would have played. Oregon. They beat number 7 Michigan State, and that one was at home. They beat number 18 UCLA, who was a good team that year. They beat number 17 Utah. That was a good team that year. And that team, yes, you're saying, oh, but Ricky, they lost to an unranked Arizona team earlier in the season. Yeah, that same Arizona team got itself up to the number 7 ranking when these two teams met in the Pac-12 title game. And guess what Oregon did? They spanked them in that title game. So they beat the number 7 team twice, the 18 team once, and then the number 17 team. They played more ranked opponents. And I know what you're saying, Ricky, it's one more ranked opponent. But when you look at the average of the ranked opponents, it's a higher average ranking for that Oregon team because they played 2 top 7 ranked teams and then 2 lowers. You're going to get a 7, a 17, and a 25 for Washington this year. That ain't going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it. Then they played the number 3 team in the playoff and blew them out. Marcus Mariota blowing out Jameis Winston before they lost to the number 4 team in Ohio State. So I think that with Washington, the big thing they will have to blame and the big thing why they could get left out, I do see a future where they do get left out of the college football playoff. And the reason why is because of their conference. It's just a weaker conference. And to me, I feel like either one of 2 conferences is going to take the 4th spot when it's all said and done, Brandon. It's either going to be Ohio State or it's going to be an Auburn team. Those are the 2 that I'm going to scratch that 3. I'll put Louisville in there maybe because Auburn and Ohio State have to play Michigan and Alabama. So they would have 2 losses where maybe Louisville has 1. So those 3 teams, with Louisville being the outside shot, more so Auburn and Ohio State, could be jumping an undefeated Husky team for that 4th spot when it's all said and done.
Do you think that there's any influence on the Pac-12 not being one of the big teams that are in primetime? When I say big teams, I mean that their teams are not the teams that are usually in primetime.
You mean like the ABC 7?
We talked about this, I think, last year or over the offseason where people were complaining that their person wasn't going to be a Heisman winner because that's only the games are played at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock when no one's watching. Do you think that really has anything to possibly do with the fact now that they're really not getting as much love as they think that they should be getting?
Well, I don't think it has to do with the game time per se. Like it's not when the game is played, it's what channel is the game being played on. If it's a normal for the Pac-12, if you're a undefeated team and you're a top 5, top 10 team and you're constantly playing games that are either early afternoon or late evening, but you're on FS1, you're on ESPN2, you're on these lesser channels, you have to be able to say, you know what? We got to get ourselves in a position schedule-wise where we have to be an ABC 7. Like, if you're not playing on those prime locations, like I say like ABC 7 for the nightcap or maybe ESPN, just ESPN 1. Not like, oh, we're on ESPN 2 for this late game. No, you have to be on the prime channels. You have to be that prime game of the week that everybody looks and goes, man, dude, we got to finish up whatever we're doing because we got to watch that game tonight. Not like, I walked into Red Robin and I asked them, could they please put on FS1 because I wanted to put on. Well, and that's a perfect example. That reminds me, Sean, and Dave, after the fast break 2 weeks ago, went out to dinner to watch some college football.
Sure. Thank you for the invite.
And we went to... I'm sorry I didn't invite you, Brandon.
Don't worry, folks. I was home that week and I couldn't go anyways.
But we walked into the restaurant. We sit down at the table, and Sean's looking on the TVs. He's like, okay, I see Ohio State, Northwestern. I see this game. I see that game. He's like, I don't see the Washington game. When you have to then ask the waitress, can we turn on, can you turn on the game? And of course, they're really nice. Oh, sure, we'll turn it on. They turned the TV on for him, so only he could see it.
Because no one else cared.
When you have to do that, that says something about your conference and about that game. And for a Pac-12 fan, you're probably sitting there going, but Ricky, that's a big game. That was a huge game. But nationally, it wasn't. That's what the Pac-12 needs. They need to pull in the more national games. I remember when Oregon went to the college football playoff, I remember saying, well, shit, I got to watch that Oregon-Arizona game. Well, shit, I got to watch this Oregon blah, blah, blah game. Man, that Oregon-Michigan State game, man, I got to watch that. That is what you need, the games that are going to pull people in no matter where they are. You have to bring a national view to your games, or else people are going to overlook you, because when you get to the college football playoff, yeah, you could be undefeated, but really it's going to be you didn't play any tough teams, because most people want to watch the tough games. They want to watch the games that have the harder teams in it.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree with you, and I think that I think there is something to be said for the fact that those games really are not on a whole lot during prime watching times for people. But I think that at the same time too is that those aren't teams that people necessarily want to be watching, even if they're on prime time, and that's why they're on FS1 or they're on ESPN2 or on a different network. The games that are on in prime time on ABC, on ESPN, you are watching you're certainly watching your Ohio States and your Big Ten. You're certainly watching the SEC on CBS. You're certainly watching all those games. Even the ACC sometimes gets a little snub. But those are the better teams. Those are the teams that, quite frankly, have the better schedule, have the better matchups, have the games that people want to watch. That's the problem with the Pac-12.
Well, and I don't want to go full Colin Cowherd here, but I'm going to bring up something that he has said in the past, and this goes to the Pac-12 in a nutshell. When you don't have teams like, I'm going to throw Oregon out there, even though that wasn't the first one he said, like Oregon, USC, UCLA, if you don't have those big market teams in your conference doing well, people aren't going to want to watch. Look at the Pac-12 numbers since USC has fallen from grace in the Pete Carroll era. Look at the teams at the bottom of the Pac-12 right now. Just 2 years ago, Oregon, they were a college football playoff team. Arizona, top of the Pac-12 South, 7th in the nation when they lost to Oregon. UCLA, last year we couldn't get enough of Rosen, Mora, and the UCLA Bruins. All of these teams are towards the bottom now. And in order to get a conference into those primetime games, you have to be compelling. You cannot just be the Washington Huskies. That cannot happen. And that is why Washington is getting snubbed. And that's why I could see them continue to get snubbed unless we see a ton of teams with 2 losses. Now, 1-loss teams, yes, I'm like, okay, they're probably going to outbeat Washington. The only thing that Washington can kind of hang its hat on and hope for is that Alabama gets the job done. They knock off Auburn, so Auburn can't have a shot at the SEC title. Michigan needs to knock Ohio State out, so they have 2 losses. And Louisville just has to lose. Those 3 teams that are sitting around, those are the big 1-loss threats. I know that West Virginia's sitting there at 1 loss, and they're the highest Big 12 team right now if I look at the playoff picture. But I really don't see a Big 12 team competing for a dethroning of the Huskies. To me, though, to kind of put it to bed for my side before I let you give your final thoughts, Brandon, the Huskies' problem is their conference. They can't fix it alone. The rest of the conference needs to come up with them, and I wouldn't be surprised if next year we had kind of the same thing we saw last year with the Pac-12. Oh, Stanford, you're all that in a bag of potatoes. You have all these good players. Oh, well, this year you're not that good. So maybe next year Washington won't be that good, and we'll find another Pac-12 team to complain about that they're undefeated and not being respected.
Well, according to Sports Media Watch Online, the Week 9 game, Washington and Utah, did pretty well by Fox Sports 1 standards. Mm-hmm. So they were the Pac-12 game of the week. They did pretty well in the ratings. They had a 0.9 final rating and 1.4 million viewers on FS1, which was up 200% in ratings and 185% in viewership from the Oklahoma-Kansas game last year, which was 0.3 and 482,000 viewers. And then the Huskies delivered the second best rating and viewership on FS1 this season, trailing only Texas, Oklahoma in Week 6, which was 1.7 on the ratings and 2.8 million viewers. So FS1 didn't do as well as the other networks, obviously. Florida Georgia on CBS did better than them. Mm-hmm. Northwestern Ohio State on ESPN did better. Baylor, Texas on ABC did better, and Miami and Notre Dame on NBC did better. They did beat out ESPN2's Texas Tech TCU game and ESPNU's Maryland Indiana game. But I think that what that says is that it still got good coverage. There were still a good amount of people watching that game. It was a big game. It was game day's spot that they were at for that game. They gave it coverage. They talked about it. People are and have been able to watch some of Washington's games this year in the sense of being able to see them in a better time than the 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock slot that they would usually get for the Pac-12 anyways. So I think that that's one thing that we can maybe start to put to rest a little bit. I just wanted to look at it myself because I was interested. I thought, okay, well, what are they really getting? Are they really getting snubbed in that time slot, or are they not? And I think that we're seeing that they're really not. It's really not that significant, I think, when it comes to that. But that could make a difference. And for the committee, you just never know with them what could be, one thing this year may not be something else the next year. So and honestly, week to week too sometimes. So I think that it will be very interesting when we get the ratings for this week because we had a one-loss team bouncing over a undefeated Pac-12 team last week. Now it'll be interesting because if they put in Washington now, they've just killed their whole argument for why they put A&M in there before.
Well, and the interesting thing that I would want to see is we kind of had the same thing this week with Ohio State, Nebraska. I want to see that rating for this week compared to the week before with Washington and Utah. But to me, I think that the big thing has to be the teams that used to be good in the Pac-12 are not anymore. And people are like, oh, yeah, cool, I'll watch this game because it was all promoted for that time slot. But you're not consistently there. And the rest of the teams are not as good as they used to be. And the conference is just a weaker conference overall. But this is where I turn the question on to you guys who are listening. Let us know down below what you guys think. Is Washington in some trouble? Will an undefeated Washington team for sure make the college football playoff? Let us know down below.